All right, good morning and welcome to the June 16th meeting of the Lextran Board of Directors. My name is Jill Barnett and I'm the General Manager of Lextran. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic state of emergency and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting of the Lextran Board of Directors will be held via video teleconference pursuant to Senate 150 and Attorney General Opinion 20-05 and in accordance with KRS 61.826 because it was not feasible to offer a primary physical location for the meeting. I will now turn it over to today's chair of the meeting, the vice chair of our board of directors, Ms. Adrienne Takor.
Thank you, Jill. Good morning, everyone. Glad you're with us today. Mr. Motley is out of town, and so I'll be leading today's meeting, and we'll start with a roll call. So just indicate with a thumbs up or a verbal acknowledgement that you're present today. Mr. Ward?
Here.
Judge Thurston?
Good morning, all. Present.
Ms. Rogers?
Good morning.
Mr. Dowell? Harding, are you here?
Sorry, I'm on mute. Hi.
No problem. And Mr. Chrisman? Rick, are you also on mute maybe?
He is, yeah.
I think I saw him here. Okay. And then Dr. Akakpo, are you here yet? I think he was running late this morning. And we'll acknowledge him when he's able to join us. It'll be his first board meeting with us. So that's the roll call. All right. We'll go ahead and get started next with public comment period. Do we have any public comment today? Mr. Combs, do we see anybody chatting or anything like that? Okay, great, thank you. So hearing and seeing none, we'll move right along with our agenda. Next on the agenda is the approval of the May 2021 minutes. I will take it that all of you all have had a chance to review those. And if you have any comments or corrections, let us know now. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve those.
George, motion to approve.
Lindsay Thurston, second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed or? All right, motion carries. The approval of the May 2021 minutes. Okay, so next we'll go ahead and move along to the chair's report that I will give in Christian's absence. First of all, just a recap to our conversation started at last meeting and then continued via email regarding when we will next be able to return to in-person meetings. We discussed it via email, and all of the board members indicated that they were interested in going back to in-person meetings. So that's good news. So we'll start that in July. More details to come, unless there's any other discussion. Any changes of heart or concerns to discuss there? And just a reminder to everyone, this is in line with the city that has also chosen to restart in-person meetings. So we're just falling in step with the change back to a little bit more normal-like operations. All right, next, just a report on our counter offers to some developers involved with the IRB deal. If you recall, this was regarding some economic development area in the Davis Bottom area, Manchester Street. And we did provide a counter offer to developers regarding that being presented to us last month. And it seems that things are moving along well with that. The intent, Lextran's participation or involvement really is quite minimal, but our involvement is related to mitigating our losses in future years of the tax bond while providing flexibility to the developer so that the project can get going and move along. Do we have any questions about that? All right. And just to follow up on our budget, the budget was originally presented to the council on May 18th. It did receive a second reading on June 10th and passed. So now it will be submitted to the state. So our budget is moving through the process as expected. All right, that's it for the chair's report, unless anybody has any questions. Okay, great. Well, then I'll turn it over next to Ms. Rogers for the nominating committee report.
Thank you. So we had a discussion with our chair, Christian Motley, about continuing to serve. And after several years of serving as our chair, he did propose changing up leadership this year and giving more opportunity to other leaders of the board. So with that, some discussions were had, and we would like to nominate Adrian Tauker. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, as our chair after several years of serving as our vice chair, and then Harding Dowell with his experience in the Transit Authority as our vice chair. This is just our nomination, so not our formal motion. I believe that will go on our packet for next month. So if there's anyone interested in wanting to be self-nominated, I think, Jill, they can nominate themselves right now in open forum, or they can connect with the nomination committee.
Yes, either would be appropriate.
And if you have any questions, also feel free to reach out to myself or Lindsay or Jill about our leadership recommendations. And both discussions were had with Christian Motley, Adrian, Harding, and Jill, just discussions of the role, the responsibilities, what that looks like moving into these roles. All right, thank you. I'll give it back to you, Adrian.
All right, thank you. Appreciate your all's volunteering to be on the nominating committee. We know that's something that comes up and has to be done, and so appreciate your involvement there. Next on our agenda today is the monthly performance report. And so I will turn it over to our Lextran staff members to provide us with that information. Take it away.
All right, thank you very much. Let me pull the presentation up. Okay, can everybody see that?
Can't see the presentation just yet, but I think it's coming.
Still nothing?
I can see it, Fred.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Yes.
All right, so our presentation for May, we'll start with our mission statement. We serve people in our community with mobility solutions. Highlights for May 2021. Joe Barnett presented our budget to the Lexington and Fayette Urban County Council, and it was passed unanimously. So as mentioned in the chair's report, that process continues on. We implemented the May 2021 service improvements. As you recall, that was some adjustments on our Leestown Road route, with some schedule tweaks and the return of 24 and Route 21. We held a virtual meeting titled Doing Business with Lextran to expand and encourage disadvantaged business enterprise. I have some more information on that a little bit later in the presentation. And lastly, the Imagine Nicholasville Road Plan was unanimously approved by the Planning Commission. So we will have more information on that moving forward. I'd like to share with you some commendations that we've received in May. Last week, a gentleman in a wheelchair had his van break down in the middle of a major intersection, and transportation supervisors Sharon Newman, William Gill, and Ben Grimes stepped up to help transport him to his destination. Thank you to each of you for your caring for our community and helping those in need. And what I understand about this commendation that I'd like to note is the gentleman that was helped here was not a Lextran rider, but still, as a member of our community, he is considered our customer, and we want to support him as much as we can. So kudos to our transportation supervisors for that. A customer commended Carrie Sullivan for a safe operation of her bus when a car pulled out in front of her on New Circle Road. And lastly, a customer commended our Lextran team on the measures that we're taking to keep the public safe by making sure everyone wears their masks correctly. So we know that May was a heavy in conversation about mask use. So we're happy to receive a commendation about that. And jumping into some of the ridership information, I know later on in our agenda today, we have an update on our COA, which is going to have more on ridership discussion. But this for May on our fixed route, remember last month we were talking about how paratransit sort of jumped up and had a great month. We had a pretty good month in fixed route in terms of our comparison to what we normally expect with our averages. It trended down from April. That's to be expected as we go into the summer months when UK is not in session. And again, I think really the what we need to look for is when the semester restarts. I mean, that's going to give us a better idea of what our ridership is going to look like moving forward. So I think the expectation is to have a good summer. Probably not going to snap back to completely 100% the way that we were, but looking towards the fall to see what that sort of looks like. On the flip side, in paratransit, another good month, but not quite as strong as it was last month compared to average. I think this is just normal sort of variance, statistical noise, as they would call it. So nothing to be too alarmed about, but it makes this graph relative to our monthly average, the change relative to our monthly average, look a little bit strange in that paratransit dipped, fixed route went up. Again, I think we are still trending in the right direction, but we see that things have been a little more rocky, for lack of a better term, since February. So it's been kind of a jump up and down, up and down, up and down. Again, I really think that when we get into the fall months with the UK going back in session, that's when we'll really have a better idea of what the ridership recovery will look like. And in our system productivity, again, our ridership was about 176,000 for the month. Paratransit was about 14,000 for the month. Our revenue miles and hours, we have surpassed where we were this time last fiscal year to date, and that has to do with last year where we cut service in reaction to the pandemic. These last few months is where that's sort of caught up from this year to last year. So that's why you see that revenue miles an hour sort of surpassed where we were last year. Productivity continues to trail along with the reduction from the pandemic. Again, we'll have to see what that looks like when UK opens back up in the fall. On safety, our preventable accidents, we had a great month there. We've had a pretty solid year for preventable accidents. Injury frequency rate, if we recall last month, it was a tick higher than what we've seen for the year. So this month we've sort of gotten back to the average. So we had a pretty low month for injury frequency rate. Days with no preventable accidents is right on target. Our days of lost time is a tick up, and we've talked about that for a couple of months now. We continue to monitor that. Only one workers' compensation claim, which is good. On the paratransit side, there were no preventable accidents. Always a good note when we can report that. So I think in total on our safety indicators, things are looking pretty good. On the maintenance side of the house, we've been tracking the preventive maintenance inspections. So we are still a perfect 100%, nearly 500 so far this fiscal year. And on miles between roll calls, we were about 6,200 miles between roll calls this month. And that is a little less than what we've seen for the rest of the year, but still, I think, within reason. And lastly, an update on our DBE meeting. So on May 25th, we held the annual Doing Business with Lextran. This is something that we were happy to get back to. We didn't get to do one last year, but we traditionally do one of these a year. And sort of the intent is to invite all the certified DBEs, go over our procurement procedures and share what we have sort of planned for procurement opportunities that are upcoming. We sent out 386 invitations, and that was the list from, that's certified through the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. We had 12 attendees. We passed out swag bags. We did 7 follow-up conversations with firms, so we had some product demonstrations. We got 6 new registrations on Bonfire. That's our procurement website. And so far, and we're not even a month away, we've already had at least one that I know about purchased from a DBE vendor. So I think that is a successful meeting, and something that we'll continue to do and continue to work on to encourage DBE support in our procurements. So that is the performance report for May. I'm happy to field any questions. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Nikki with financials.
Ms. Falkenberry, before you get started, I would like to add one thing about the customer commendation that Mr. Combs reported on with the gentleman who his vehicle was broken down in the middle of the intersection. So while that was happening, Emily Elliott, our community relations manager, and I both received a contact from one of the local council members' offices about that exact situation. And before we could even respond via email to that council member or by phone, our transportation supervisors that were out in the field on the street saw the man and responded and helped him. So very proud of our team for seeing a need and jumping in to participate even before they had any additional information about a situation that was happening. So kudos to them.
Fred?
Yes.
On your first slide, you mentioned something about Nicholasville Road. I didn't catch that. What was that about?
The Imagine Nicholasville Road plan, that was the corridor plan led by the MPO that passed unanimously through Planning Commission.
Okay.
Fred, I have a couple of questions. Oh, Rick, are you still talking?
No, I'm done.
Okay. Fred, I've got a couple of questions on customer service. So the on-time performance was 91% now for the previous month. And I'm just wondering, what can we do to keep it from slipping?
We have to be mindful of the changing traffic conditions. I think that's number one. And I feel like some of the data that I've seen, some of the unknowns have started to work themselves out, because that's the real trouble with scheduling in a time like this is if we have traffic, but that traffic is reliable, like we know between 5:30 and 6 o'clock, it's going to, back up inbound Nicholasville Road. If that happens every single day, we can build a schedule around it and keep our on-time performance up. What gets tricky is when we don't know a consistent traffic pattern. And I think some of that is starting to work out as we've reopened. I think, Leestown Road's another great example. We've seen a lot of traffic come back on Leestown Road, but it's starting to be consistent. If you try to go outbound at, 5:15, you know what to expect on a daily basis. So as long as we are mindful of the changing traffic conditions, I feel like we can do a good job of staying on top of our on-time performance.
All right, then my other area of concern is past boardings. And so for both the month and the year to date, it's substantially higher than what it was previously. And I would think that is a very large cause of frustration for riders. And just wondering what we can do to fix that.
We are certainly paying closer attention to that through the way that we evaluate each comment that we get, not only past boardings, but we've got a process in place that we've started based on our conversations towards the end of last year to validate each complaint and to make sure that we're understanding what's happening at each time that this, that a past boarding occurs. So I think, we might have more a deeper dive on that in the future, but we are trying to be reactive and mindful when we do get these complaints in, specifically towards past boardings, and the other one is discourtesies. So those are the two that we're really trying to hone in on.
Is there anything specific on the past boardings? Like, I mean, is it because of drivers not familiar with routes? Is it because maybe the complaint isn't exactly what happened?
That is part of it. You know, and I'm not going to say that all of the past boardings that you see are from, you know, customers who are at the stop late and they see the bus pull out and they're chasing behind and say, oh, I got past. That happens, but I'm not going to say that that's all of it. And it's sort of a thorny issue because there is so many different factors and causes that can contribute to a past boarding to happen, be it valid or not. So it's hard to nail down one specific silver bullet solution to make these things go down. But we are, you know, I know Jason and operations have been working really closely with the complaints and to try to understand any trends or patterns that we've seen.
Thank you.
Fred, this is Harding. Are we still on the past boarding issue, or are we still looking at reduced vehicle capacities right now? And does that mean that we get full buses faster?
We technically are still under reduced capacity, but we don't see vehicle capacities now that UK is not in session. It's very rare that a trip would reach that capacity to pass someone. And if that ever does happen, there's another bus behind it. You know, we would send out another bus to make sure that that customer is picked up as soon as possible.
Great, thank you.
If there's no further questions, I'll pass the baton over to Nikki.
Thank you, Fred. Good morning, everyone. I'll wait till Fred gets our screen back here. There we go. Okay, this is our balance sheet for the month of May 2021. As you can see, our operating cash is higher than last year. That's due to our CARES funding. Everything's pretty much the same as last year as far as the balance sheet is concerned, but I will be glad to answer any questions that you may have. Okay, let's move on to the revenue and expense sheet. Mr. Ward had made a suggestion last month to add fiscal year 19 to this sheet so that we could see what pre-COVID looked like. So we did that on this sheet. As you can tell, our property tax has passed where our budgeted amount was, and we've also passed what we reached last year. So we're very happy with that. I know we've had a lot of talk on passenger revenue, and you can see where we are there, 304,000, of course, versus what 2020 and 2019 were. And we are hopefully are seeing that slowly come back up. Our federal funds are higher, of course, based on our CARES funding. And we have not received any state funding for this fiscal year as we have in the past, but we're hoping to receive something in the next fiscal year. We're not for sure, but we have requested that money. Our expenses we're still under budget. We're very happy with that. A lot of the expenses are pretty much in line with 2020. We have one thing I thought was interesting was to look at the diesel cost and the cost of diesel in 2020 and 2021 versus the cost in 2019. So it's a significant reduction there in the cost of diesel. We hope it stays that way. So we do watch that every day. One thing that has increased that we've noticed this year is this year and last year, of course, is the electric. For the facilities, of course, and that cost, as you know, goes up every so often. So we do keep an eye on that too. Our paratransit expenses are slowly coming back up as the ridership increases, and but we're very pleased at this time with still being under budget. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
budget, is that because of overtime?
Yes, yes, most of that is overtime, yes.
So I guess we still have some vacancies.
We do have some vacancies. We also had, since the fiscal year started in July, we had some people still out on long-term leave. We had some due to quarantines and things like that. So we had to cover those, but we do have a few vacancies for our operators. We do have a new class starting next week with hopefully 6 operators. So we're hoping that will help us some. And we also try to do training in the months now that UK is out, so we can get refresher training in and things like that. So.
Nikki, is that a typical size for an operator class?
We usually try to get around 10. We have had a lack of applicants, as much of the workforce across the country has had. So we are happy to have 6. I believe our last class had 2. So we're hoping that we can get those 6 in class.
Thank you.
Well, what is our beginning wages for mechanics and drivers?
The driver beginning wage is $14.94, and every 6 months they get an increase after they go into revenue service until they reach the top wage, which takes 30 months. And the top wage right now is $22.99 for an operator, and the top wage for a mechanic is around $25.
I would just say that beginning wage is getting a little thin in this market right now. It's just barely above, kind of at the sweet spot, but not, it's hard. I mean,
You're exactly right, Mr. Chrisman.
What's that?
I said you're exactly right. We have found that also, and just as a point of note, the starting entry rate is a contractually negotiated item at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Jill, does that forbid you, Jill, from paying more than that? Is the rate? I mean, it's a concrete the only thing you can do, or is that the minimum you can pay?
It is based on the language in the contract that is the rate.
Maybe when you get into negotiation this next time, you look at that language and maybe put in something that allows for changes upward based on market conditions or something like that. I mean, talk it over with the attorneys just to see what they feel about it, but it really hamstrings you to be offering a rate that is same or less than a lot of other positions that probably require less skill.
Certainly, and we are in active contract negotiations now, so we will take that note. Thank you.
It's kind of tricky because if you pick up that beginning wage, that puts compression on all the other wages, and so I don't know. It's kind of a tricky thing to solve without really spending a whole lot of money. You know what I'm saying, George?
Yeah, I understand that, but maybe if how often did you say they get increases?
Every 6 months.
Yeah, so maybe that part can be accelerated somehow or something.
Yes, or maybe have a hiring wage that's much higher but lasts for a couple of years, and then they get back on the steps. I don't know, but yes, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
These are items that we will discuss at negotiation. So thank you for the feedback.
Okay, do we have any other questions regarding the revenue and expenses? Okay, thank you. Jill, I'll turn it back over to you.
Jill, I think you're muted, maybe.
You're exactly right. Thank you for that. The next items are action items. Are we okay to proceed?
Yes. Actually, but if I could ask for some leave for just one moment. Dr. Kofi Akakpo has joined us, and I just wanted to acknowledge. Hello, Dr. Akakpo. Haven't seen you in a bit, but I'm glad to be working with you on this board and wanted to welcome you into your first meeting with us. If you'd like to say hello, or you could take this opportunity now, or you could do it later.
Well, doesn't hurt to say hi to everyone. And as she said, my name is Dr. Kapo, BCTC president, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
All right, Jill. Yes, I think we can now return to the agenda for the action items.
All right, thank you very much. The first action item that we have this month is the resolution to award a contract for pension fund management services. This is the normal course of business that we would award a contract for pension fund management. We are at the expiration date in our current engagement. So we issued a request for proposals back in April with 3 qualified proposals received. Those firms are listed on your resolution: ARGI, Mariner, and PFM. The members of the pension committee, along with our engaged actuary, performed an evaluation of the proposals, and Mariner Wealth Advisors received the highest ranking evaluation score and is recommended to award a contract for that. The term will be for 5 years and will begin on July 1st of this year. And I'll be happy to answer any questions as best I can about that process or those proposals.
Jill, this is Harding. How does the fee compare to past contracts?
It is very, very close, just a slight increase.
And it looks like Mariner has locations in Louisville and Cincinnati. Do they have a Lexington office?
They do not. Is that correct, Nikki?
They just recently opened one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's very, very recent.
Great.
All right. If there are no other questions or discussion on this proposed resolution, I would entertain a motion to accept this resolution as written.
This is Harding. I'll move to accept the resolution.
I'll second. This is Lindsay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'd just like to say I'm a member of the pension committee and worked with Mariner, and I think it's a good selection. They're very much.
Thank you, Nick. And Rick, thank you also for your service on the pension committee. You are a longstanding member, so thank you for that.
All right. Hearing no opposition, motion carries to accept resolution 2021-10. All right, next.
All right, thank you, board members. The next resolution today is the resolution to award a contract for hybrid battery replacement. As you know, we have a number of vehicles in our fleet that are hybrid electric diesel models, and in the normal course of their life need a battery replacement. The cost of battery replacement is such that it meets the threshold that this would go out for a competitive bid with RFP process and come to the board for approval. We issued a request for proposals back in April with proposals due at the beginning of June, and a staff committee from procurement and maintenance reviewed the one qualified proposal that we received, and that was from Clark Power Services. Receiving that one contract, obviously that is our recommendation for award. We do work with Clark on a number of other maintenance items. However, the contract for hybrid battery replacement is a new item for Lextran. The term of this contract will be 1 year, and it has one additional option year that could be exercised at the end of the term if the pricing is agreeable. And the source of funding on this project is our federal 5307 capital maintenance line item. So I would be happy to answer any other questions that you might have. I believe our Director of Maintenance, Jim Barrett, is also on the meeting this morning. So hopefully together we can answer any questions that you might have.
This is Lindsay. Is it atypical to only receive one qualified proposer? Or is that normal?
For this particular type of item on a bus, not entirely. The reason for that is that in order to do this type of work, they have to be certified through the manufacturers, and there's only one somewhat local certified agency. And because we have to take the vehicle to them to do the work, that prevents us from going very far.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
How often do these batteries need to be replaced? Is it by miles or time on the road?
This is the first time in the course of any of these vehicles' life that we have needed to do a battery replacement on them. And the oldest one we have is from 2009. Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
The life of the battery depends on the use of the bus. You use a hybrid a little bit different. You try to put in as much stop and go traffic as you can. Lextran has seemed to do a fantastic job with that. Most of the hybrid batteries will last somewhere between 6 and 9 years, and we're pushing 11 on this first one with this trolley. An excellent job.
Yes, that does sound great. Thank you.
So with that said, Jim, we're probably looking at one a year for a while, right?
Well, that depends on the fleet right now. If we take them out of service at the 12 years by buying new vehicles, we'll save this $60,000 or approximately $60,000 by not replacing the battery. We've also got the ability of taking the batteries out of a bus we just put them in and put them in another bus to increase that service of that bus. So this gives us a little wiggle room to work where we're not really buying more than one battery a year for the next couple of years.
And how, if the battery's replaced, does that mean the life of the bus increases another so many years, or are there body issues and that sort of thing?
There's body issues and other things, but not by FTA regulations. You can keep them for longer than the 12 years. And spending that kind of money, we would make sure that the body is sound and we try to get as much life out of it as we can.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for that, Mr. Barrett.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions? Discussion? All right. We're hearing none at this time. Would someone like to move that the resolution to award the contract for hybrid battery replacement 2021-11 be approved?
George, motion to approve resolution 2021-11.
Rick, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries to adopt resolution 2021-11. Okay, I think we have one more action item tonight.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you. The next item for vote amongst this group is our resolution to adopt our fiscal year 2022 meeting schedule for the Lextran Board of Directors. The proposed meeting schedule is included in your packet. The meetings are proposed to stay at 10 a.m., which is our current time, with board meetings on the third Wednesday of each month. There are 2 proposed work sessions that would be held as needed in there, along with finance committee meetings and pension committee meetings on those scheduled dates. I'd be happy to answer any questions or take comments.
I think this has been a pretty good schedule. If there isn't any, did anyone have a comment there? All right, if there isn't any, would someone, we would entertain a motion to approve this board meeting schedule for fiscal year 2022.
This is Harding. I'll move to approve resolution 2021-12 as written.
This is Lindsay. I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, the motion carries that resolution 2021-12 for the fiscal year 2022 board meeting calendar. Motion carries.
All right, thank you, board. And as a point of reference, because this does start next month, I will quickly send out those meeting invitations so you can get those items reserved on your calendar. So I will hopefully get that accomplished before the close of the week. And we will plan to return to an in-person meeting next month in July here at our West Loudon Avenue facility. So I look forward to seeing all of you in person.
Great, thank you so much, Jill. Okay. Next on our agenda today, we have a presentation of the Lexington Comprehensive Analysis Update. So I will turn that over so that we can hear this presentation.
Thank you for that. Just as a reminder, this comprehensive operations analysis is a process that Lextran generally undertakes about every 5 years. And so this process has been ongoing for just shy of the last year. And we've engaged with a firm called Kinetics to do some of this work for us. I think today we have Mr. Dan Nelson, who has worked closely with members of our staff, most notably Mr. Fred Combs in his planning role with service, as well as in operations with Jason Dial and his team. So I believe he is getting his presentation ready. Mr. Combs, do you have anything to add before Mr. Nelson begins his presentation?
Yeah, we started this project, sort of mid 2020. Things have gone well. This is mostly their existing conditions and a little bit of the survey that we've completed. We've not done the deep in-depth analysis on the survey, but so far it's been very interesting and to see how things are really playing out in the field. I think you're going to be impressed by the work that Dan and his team have done. And I think, as we move forward to complete the projects and start thinking about how our service, how we can improve our service, where we're doing well. I mean, there's some really good stuff in here on things that we need to share with the broader public that we've done pretty well especially over the past year. So, any questions you all have, please let us know. We will do our best to work through them. And with that, I think, Dan, are you ready?
I think so. Can you guys see my presentation up on the screen here?
Yes, sir. All right.
Perfect.
Take it away.
Can you hear? Okay, great. Can you hear me okay? Sometimes I have some audio issues with the screen sharing here. So if everything is good, I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, Fred and Jill, for the introduction. Again, my name is Dan Nelson. I'm with Kinetics Transportation Group. We are a DBE certified transit and transportation planning firm out of Atlanta, Georgia. Specialize almost primarily in transit. We also do travel demand modeling and data analytics. So we're very much a transit operations and service planning oriented firm. We're really excited to be working with y'all and Fred and his team over the last year. Has some good information to share this morning. I do want to introduce the rest of our team. So we are working with Cheryl Kersey at Kersey & Kersey Architects as part of this contract under the A&E contract. So Cheryl is our project director. Also want to mention Fred Giselle with ETC Institute. Not here today, but he is an important member of the team managing the onboard survey that we were finally able to get accomplished about a month and a half ago. So we were excited about that. So this is our core team. This morning, I want to give a brief overview of the project, kind of where we're at, what we've accomplished over the last 12 months, and what we can expect moving forward as we move to wrap up the study. I'm going to give some high-level key findings from the existing conditions assessment that we've completed, and then talk about the next steps and what you can expect as we work to wrap things up. Then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. But certainly, if there's anything along the way here as I'm talking, if you want to step in and ask a question, please feel free to do so. All right. So to give a kind of a high-level overview of the project and our study goals and objectives, I want to talk about kind of what we used as our framework to guide our analysis and ultimately our recommendations. So we're pivoting off of the three key pillars that Fred and his team have used in the past to help guide their planning efforts. These are to deliver a high-quality product and service, demonstrate value to the community, and manage and sustain resources. Within each of these key pillars, we tailored some key objectives for this COA to help guide our work. So in terms of delivering a high-quality product and service, we want to seek to increase productivity, provide more direct routes, provide better connections throughout the system. We want to improve on-time performance. In terms of the demonstrating value to the community, key pillar, we want to develop services that support community needs and preferences. We want to improve services to existing markets and capture new markets, identify where we might be able to capture better and more market share. We also want to identify new partnership opportunities with other organizations throughout the community that will help us continue to better serve the needs of Lexington residents and visitors, as well as help us gain market share. Finally, in terms of managing and sustaining resources, we want to make sure that we're maximizing productivity of existing capital assets and revenue streams. So we want to make sure that we're using the public dollar wisely and that we're stretching our resources as far as we possibly can. We also want to increase cost effectiveness and efficiency of the paratransit and fixed route operation. And finally, we want to identify capital and operational needs as part of this project. In terms of the recommendations that we made, we're certainly going to identify what those cost impacts will be. So these are the key guiding principles and guideposts for this project that we're working within. Our project schedule, as identified here on the screen. As you can see, we have a work plan that's divided into 5 key tasks. And as you can imagine, like with everything in life over the past 18 months or so, our project schedule was impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Task 3, which typically would take 4 to 6 months, got extended out as we awaited a window of opportunity to conduct our onboard survey. So the onboard was really a key input into a lot of our data analysis. So that was something that we kind of needed to happen. So we extended out task 3 a few months into the early part of this year. And finally, in April, May, we got that window of opportunity to conduct the onboard survey, which we're really happy about. We're crunching those numbers now, and we are wrapping up our assessment of that data as we speak. So as we move into the summer months here, we're going to refresh our needs assessment that was initially prepared as part of task 3, and then start to develop our draft recommendations over the next few months as we move to wrap up task 4. Task
Ms.
5.
Nelson,
Yes, ma'am.
we cannot see your schedule. We are still on the study goals and objectives slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong screen here. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So as I was alluding to here, you can see our project schedule. Task 5, as we move to wrap up the project over the next couple months, we're going to put together an implementation and phasing plan based on our recommendations, a capital and financial plan based on the cost impacts of the recommendations, and then we'll tie everything together with the final report. And we're shooting to have that complete by the end of October of this year. So some of our key accomplishments to date under task 3, we have developed a comprehensive suite of what we call our service and market assessment dashboards, and I'm going to talk about that more here in a second. We conducted a review of the existing labor agreement to see if there's any opportunities for cost savings or service performance, efficiency gains. We also conducted a market analysis and service performance assessment to identify needs and opportunities for service enhancements. And then finally, we completed an existing conditions report that ties all those sub-deliverables together. Task 4, which is our service alignment and analysis task, that's essentially putting together recommendations. As we had some downtime waiting for the onboard survey, we conducted a detailed runtime audit. So we took running time and on-time performance data on a route-by-route basis to get a better understanding of the actual observed speeds and running times of each route. As we develop new service recommendations, we're going to use this data to hopefully rebuild the route schedules so we can improve on-time performance and reliability. As I mentioned, we conducted an onboard survey back in April and May, and we did conduct some initial service design workshops with staff and developed some initial recommendations. So that gives us a really good starting point moving into the next couple months as we move to wrap things up. So as I just mentioned, as part of the existing conditions task, we developed what we call our service and market assessment dashboards. And what these do are take the wealth of data that Lextran has at its disposal through automatic passenger counters, which count ridership at the stop level, AVL data, which calculates vehicle running time and speed, as well as third-party data sources from the US Census and cell phone-based travel pattern data. We can take all this data and we put it under one roof through a custom web-based dashboard. And we built this and provided access to Fred and his staff. And our project team used this to support our existing conditions analysis. And this is also available for Fred and his team to use going forward. It allows us to look at understanding ridership patterns throughout the system. We actually have an example here on the screen from a ridership dashboard. Allows us to drill down by time of day, day of week, month, at the route level and select and aggregate ridership patterns to truly understand what's going on throughout the system and where there might be opportunities to improve service. Comparing it to other data sets, as I mentioned, LBS, the cell phone travel pattern data, and census data, we can start to understand where there's mismatches in the market and where we might be able to improve services to better capture more market share. So it's a really powerful tool. We're really excited about it. It's really helped us as part of this project, and we hope that it provides value to Fred and his team going forward. And I will mention we'd be happy to provide access to any of y'all who might be interested in taking a look. We can set you up with a login to this if it's something you'd be interested in taking a look at. All right, so next we want to give a brief overview of the key findings of our existing conditions analysis. To do that, we're going to answer 5 key questions that we've laid out here. First, how does Lextran compare to its peers? We conducted a peer analysis and we're able to understand how Lextran stacks up against similar sized transit agencies. Next, how has Lextran fared during the pandemic? Is Lextran service equitably distributed across the community? Fourth, what did we learn from the onboard survey? And finally, fifth, are there any gaps in the market that are underserved that we can try to better serve as part of this COA project? So to tackle the first question, how does Lextran compare to its peers? We pivoted off of a previous peer set that Fred and his team had developed as part of an earlier project. And as you can see on the map here, this peer set is primarily based on agency is located on the eastern half of the United States, focused in the Southeast and the upper Midwest. These are primarily college towns. Have a major research university or a similar major activity generator that really drives ridership activity. Other criteria that we used, service area population, service area size, agency size as measured by the number of peak vehicles. Governance structure of the transit agency is certainly important. So we took all these criteria and the ultimate peer cohort that we used is identified in the agencies that you see on the map here. So what did we learn from that information? We used 2019 National Transit Database data. That's the most recent year available. It's also pre-pandemic, so that's it gives us a good clean apples to apples comparison to compare against. And what we want to focus on here in this slide is, I know this is a lot of numbers to throw at you. What we want to focus on is the colors here. So the cells highlighted in green are where Lextran performs better than the peer average, and the cells highlighted in red are where Lextran is worse than the peer average. And by and large, what we're seeing is a lot of positive signs here. The successes that we see are in terms of productivity and cost effectiveness, where Lextran's passenger trips per revenue hour and per revenue mile are above the peer average. In terms of cost efficiency and effectiveness, the cost per passenger trip is below the peer average, which is what you want to see. There's a couple of these items under cost efficiency and effectiveness that we see some red though. However, in terms of operating expense per revenue hour, it's only slightly above the peer average. But when we look at the 5-year annual growth rate, we're trending in the right direction. So you want your cost metrics to be going down, right? So on an annual basis over the last 5 years, Lextran's actually been heading in the right direction, whereas its peers have been seeing cost increases. So despite the fact that this figure is slightly above the average, we're certainly heading in the right direction, which is what we want to see. Some challenges that we've identified as part of this data: operating speed. Lextran tends to operate fixed route buses that are a little bit slower compared to its peers, and obviously this is related to a number of external factors, but it's certainly something that we can try and dig into as part of this project. Service utilization per capita is another area that we'd like to try and improve. And again, this goes back to identifying where there's areas in the market, where there's market opportunities to try and capture more market share, to try and increase the number of people relative to our population size that we serve here in Lexington that use public transit. On the paratransit side of the house, we see similar trends. A lot of positive signs here in terms of cost effectiveness and efficiency. Almost entirely across the board, we are seeing favorable metrics compared to the peers. Some of the challenges that we see: productivity tends to be a little bit below the peer average. Operating speed, again, a little bit lower than average, as well as service utilization per capita. So whereas on the fixed route side, we want to see as much service utilization per capita, on the paratransit side, where the cost per trip is quite high, we want to try and control that. So that's certainly something that raises the flag and something that we want to, again, dig into a little bit further as part of this study. So let me pause there. Any questions on any of the peer data that we've presented? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, Dan, the Harding Dowell, thanks for doing all this. I wonder about the expenses per revenue hour, the trend. Have you been able to discern whether that's driven by an increase in revenue hours over fixed expenses or an actual decline in expenses?
I believe it's maybe a little bit of both. Fred, I don't know if you have that information at your fingertips here. But I believe primarily it was a decline in actual expenses.
Are we talking fixed route or paratransit?
I was more focused on the fixed route.
Can we pop back a slide, please? So we did have, this is 2019, so our hours have been fairly steady. So I would agree with Dan that there was a little bit of both going on, and how that's going to play out moving forward as we start to dig into the more recent numbers, that's going to be the telling piece.
Mhm.
Because, our hours now have been where they were, cut after the pandemic and slowly returned, to see what happens there with our that equation between expenses and hours.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'm more concerned by the trend in expense per revenue mile, because I'd like to see us, doing more coverage on a mileage basis, but that's just me. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point there. In terms of the cost per mile, that's primarily driven by the fact that, as you pretty much just pointed out, that Lextran operates fewer revenue miles compared to a lot of its peers. We have a smaller, more compact service area. So that's primarily why you're seeing this metric so much higher than your peers.
That's good to understand. I didn't know that. So thanks for clarifying.
One more thing I do want to point out here that I think is interesting and worth noting, farebox recovery is right on par with the peer average. So that's the amount of farebox revenue generated relative to operating expense, right? Right on par with the peer average. It's been increasing over the last 5 years pretty substantially. But the average fare that the passengers pay is well below the peer average. So that indicates that you're still able to recoup a level of cost commensurate with your peers, but you're able to provide service at a lower cost per passenger. So I would certainly say that that's a good sign.
Dan, can you say how the average speed is calculated?
Revenue miles per revenue hours. So it's a very kind of high level aggregate measure of speed. Certainly we can break that down at the route level using different data sources, but this is purely just revenue hours over revenue.
And how far apart are we from the peers?
About 3 miles an hour. So it's fairly significant.
And there is a built environment explanation for that as well. And it goes back to the compact nature of our service. We don't have any service on a limited access road in the city. So we're not on the interstate. We're not on the part of New Circle Road that's limited access. That's not completely unheard of in other agencies, but that's fairly rare. I mean, you would have an express service that would go from a bedroom community into a downtown, and that, your speed would increase because you're on a faster roadway. So I think, and Dan and I had a quick conversation about this a few days ago. If you took the average roadway speed limit, I would be willing to guess that our average roadway speed limit is less than most other agencies. And Dan, can you maybe take that a step further in what you've seen from other places?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it has to do with, as you mentioned, Fred, the lack of express service that's built in here. Some of these other peers might have some limited stop or express service that would certainly influence the average speed. So certainly that's something at play here, but it's definitely an area of focus for us as we move forward to try and understand this and look at strategies to make sure we're delivering the fastest possible product that we can within reason.
So that doesn't take into account all the people having to go to the transit center to transfer?
Probably not directly, no.
I think of this more of the more service we would have like at UK, where our speed would be slower just because of congestion. That's going to drive that number down.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
George, I think you make a good point, and I'd be interested to see if this is a data set that's even available of wait times per passenger trip or per passenger mile. Because of a lot of our routes are low frequency and they all seem to run through the transit center, I suspect that we're not going to perform particularly well on that metric.
Harding, I was going to ask the same thing. If there was a metric for average trip time, over the course of a route or our most frequently used routes compared to similar data in another authority.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Yeah, we
Dave.
we can try to track something like that down. I don't know if within this data set, through the National Transit Database, which FTA maintains, I don't know if we could pull anything like that specifically, but we could, dig in on a peer by peer basis to try and dig up some information along those lines. We can
And I
certainly
think
look into that.
we can get at trip times, but it's really hard to get at wait times. So, if you're thinking of your trip is I leave my house and then I have that that amount of time that it takes me to walk to a bus stop, that's the piece that, maybe some of this comes out of the survey, but that's the piece that's really hard to measure on a consistent basis, every month or every year. That's what's hard to catch, is that first mile, last mile sort of time. And that plays a factor into what we see everywhere else. But that's the key here, I think, that's really hard to get at.
And Fred, because we don't necessarily tag people on their way off the bus, we don't have a great way of tracking if someone's making a transfer, what that wait time in transfer is.
We do have the ability to look at some of the wait time and transfers because we know which route, as long as they're not using a pass, as long as they're using a ticket transfer, we can see which route they're coming from and which route they're going to.
Okay.
And we could do some analysis that way to get sort of at that transit center specific wait time for a transfer.
Yeah, and also as part of our existing conditions assessment, we did do a pretty extensive accessibility analysis, which looks at, based on existing schedules, how long does it take somebody to travel to key destinations throughout the city? And that's all in our report, and takes into account scheduled wait times and transfer times. So we can certainly share that with you to help inform that question.
Great.
And Fred and Dan, this is Jane. I'm also on the phone. I'm having some internet issues. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So, and this is more of a simple question. Our average fare at 82 cents, is that because some fares are free? Because all of our fares are $1. Is that right? And so is there something else pulling that down?
A monthly pass would also pull that down.
Yeah.
Any kind of discounted fare would pull that down.
Veterans.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions on the peer data, I'm going to keep chugging along here. Our next question that we wanted to try to answer this morning: how has Lextran fared during the pandemic? So again, we pulled National Transit Database data. What we see here is 2 years worth of data at the monthly level. And this is through February of 2021, so February of this year, which was the latest month that was available. What we found was that on a year-over-year basis, Lextran's impacts, ridership impacts were less severe relative to its peers. So whereas the peer average in the first couple months of the pandemic, ridership dropped by 82%, Lextran only dropped about 70%. And throughout the recovery, Lextran has tended to recover more quickly compared to its peers, but the ridership is still well below the pre-pandemic levels, as you all well know. Lextran, at least as of February of this year, was about 56% its pre-pandemic levels, whereas the peers were about 70% below, and the national average was about 60% below. So by and large, what this tells us is that despite having a large proportion of ridership in Lextran that's related to university-driven ridership, the impacts were less severe compared to its peers, which is notable in that the people that were left riding are the folks that truly depend on Lextran to meet their daily travel needs. So the people that are left are your riders who are going to stick with you through thick and thin, and truly depend on this to meet their transportation needs. So we found that this was pretty interesting, especially when you consider just how much ridership we know is attributed to the university. The fact that ridership decline still wasn't as low as the general peer average was notable. Our next question is Lextran service equitably distributed across the community? We measure this by looking at the percentage of population served within a distance from a bus stop, so a quarter mile, a half mile, or 3/4 of a mile. relative to the county total, to the Fayette County total. We do that for both the general population as well as equity populations, including minority, low income, and carless households. What we found was that in general, Lextran's fixed route network is designed to maximize service to equity communities. So at least at a system level, at a high level, Lextran has designed its service to meet the needs of these communities. So a greater proportion of minority, low income, and carless households have access to a stop within each of these distance thresholds compared to the population at large. Now, certainly there's opportunities to continue to improve this at the neighborhood level as we drill down to smaller areas of the community, and we'll seek to do that as part of the COA. But by and large, at a system level, this is a good sign that service is equitably distributed.
Dan, can I interrupt you real quick?
Absolutely.
I apologize. Are those half-mile, quarter-mile, three-quarter-mile distances as the crow flies, or are those measured walking distances?
Those are as the crow flies for this analysis. As you know, you're driving towards here, it certainly isn't impacted if you were to do it based on walking distances. And I mentioned a second ago about the accessibility analysis that we performed. That analysis does take into account walk distance and roadway network constraints. So we can look at it both ways, but the quick and dirty high level method that we used here is based on the as the crow flies.
Okay.
So next, what did we learn from the onboard survey? As I've mentioned, we conducted the onboard survey between April 19th and April 30th. This was a tablet-based intercept survey. It was developed based on a sampling plan that is consistent with FTA guidelines to ensure that we have adequate sampling both at the route and by time of day levels, so we can ensure that we have adequate sampling for each route throughout the system, as well as by time of day. So that produced a 13% sampling result and 1,300 usable surveys. Some of the questions that we asked on the survey included rider characteristic questions, understanding who was riding Lextran, travel behavior, travel patterns, so we can understand travel movement throughout the system. We also asked some customer satisfaction questions, which we'll share with you in a second. All right, so who's riding Lextran? We learned that for all of the customers that we surveyed, including both college students as well as the general public, and that's important to keep in mind here as we look at these numbers, that we're lumping everybody together. And there's going to be a different profile of the typical rider who's a college student versus the profile of a non-college student. And as we work through this data, we're going to be splitting that out so we can assure that we're identifying the needs and preferences for both rider cohorts. That's a really important caveat to keep in mind here as we look at these numbers. So what we see is that about 3/4 of Lextran riders live in 2 or less person households. Over half are employed, either full or part-time. 2/3 do not have access to a working vehicle. And about 80% have access to a smartphone with the data plan. And that's important as we start to consider potential technology deployments in the future, dealing with maybe mobile ticketing or various trip planning apps. We want to understand how many people actually could potentially use that type of investment if Lextran were to make an investment in that sort of technology.
Dan, any idea what those statistics are for our peers?
I would have to look into that and get back to you. I know that nationwide, when we looked at this at other transit agencies, I think that's a pretty representative figure. That 80% is pretty solid. We've asked this question at other transit agencies, and it seems roughly that same 80% figure. I think it's in the ballpark.
What about in the other 3 areas? Similar?
Again, I don't have a good. I would have to get back to you specifically on the peers to give you a good sense of that. But I think in general, I'll give you a specific example. I'm also doing a COA in Jackson, Mississippi right now. Vehicle availability there was even lower. It was more like 20%. Okay, so 64%. You have a greater share of riders that actually do have access to vehicles here, for example.
Is there a correlation?
Would it be safe to say that those people who do not have access to a working vehicle in a given month would have more rides, take more rides on the bus than those that do?
It's something we could certainly cross-tabulate. Fred might have already done that. I know that's something that my team is looking at, but we are going to be looking at those correlations. And absolutely, yes, I think that's a fair assumption to make, that people who don't have a car are going to be making more trips on an average.
Yeah. So in other words, the number of trips from people who don't have a vehicle would be much higher than 64%. It'd be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I was wondering if there would be a correlation or a way to coordinate some data mining between, let's say, the 36% unemployed or retired, and which percentage of those folks have smartphones, especially as we think about technology, and then maybe some things about demographic data and housing access, employment access, and which of our riding populations are within that 73% versus the 58% in terms of their housing status, especially.
Certainly, yeah, and that's the beauty of this data set, is we can cross-tabulate all these different variables to try and mine out insight from this information. And that's certainly what we're working on right now, and we'll be excited to share that with you once we have that analysis complete.
Thank you.
All right, so to continue on here, some other key highlights from our profile of the typical Lextran rider. About half are between the ages of 16 and 34. About half are white Caucasian. About a third are African American. Income, about almost 2/3 have low annual incomes, household incomes below $20,000 per year. About 9% have incomes over $50,000. So again, this really points towards that key cohort that is truly, transit dependent, relies on Lextran for their day-to-day transportation needs, because it's their last option of last resort. College students, as I mentioned, it's an important consideration here. 40% are college students. About another 1.4% are vocational or technical college students, and less than 1% are K-12 students. Then finally, rider travel characteristics. We learned that about 94% of Lextran riders walked to and from the bus stop. Only 4% drove to access a bus stop. And we do have all this information geocoded, so we can look at it at the point level, so we can understand where these people started their trip, where they ended their trip, and then drill down based on how they access the bus stop. So we can see where the drive access commuters are coming from, as well as the walk access. And then we actually geocoded the origin destination to the first bus stop that the passengers got on, to be able to calculate how long their actual walk time was. So that provided some very useful information that we can use to understand where there might be necessary improvements to help walk access availability as well. About half of passengers begin and end their trip at home, as you might expect. 15% work-based trips. About 3/4 make no transfers, and about 1/4 of passengers make one transfer. In terms of frequency of use, 44% ride at least every day or 5 days a week. Another 34% ride 3 to 4 days per week. So that's almost 80% of your riders that are pretty regular riders that are riding at least 3 times per week.
Dan, how hard is it to back the college students out and see how those demographics change and these percentages change?
Very easy. Yeah, we'll be able to produce, and we've already done this. We'll be able to produce a separate report for both cohorts.
Yeah, because I would think that really skews these numbers a lot.
It does. Absolutely, it does. Yep. All right, finally, in terms of customer satisfaction, we asked a number of questions to ask riders to rate their satisfaction with various aspects of Lextran's service. Won't go through all these individually, but by and large, this tells a good story that people are happy with Lextran. They're happy with service overall. On average, across all of these different questions, the 78% of respondents were satisfied or strongly satisfied. Areas where we see potential room for improvement are weekends. Weekend service availability was the one area where folks really tended to see room for potential improvement. All right, finally, so, sorry, was there a question? Nope, okay. So finally, to wrap up here, so how do we address gaps in the market? You know, we presented really a lot of good news here. There's a lot of good things to build upon that we've seen in the data as we've taken a look at Lextran's operation, both on the fixed route and paratransit side. But there's still room for improvement and room to grow. And we're going to seek to address those gaps in the market in 4 key areas. So the first being improving frequency. We're going to look at high ridership corridors and high density corridors as defined by the Lexington Comprehensive Plan, and target those for frequency improvements where we think it makes sense. We're also going to look at key travel markets as measured by the cell phone data that I've mentioned. We got 2 months worth of cell phone data, so we can understand based on everybody who travels in the region, where are they going? We can compare that to information from the onboard survey that shows us where transit riders are going and where there might be a mismatch there and a potential opportunity to tap a new market. So we're going to prioritize frequency improvements as one strategy. Second, we're going to improve access to jobs and service. So we want to improve service design. We want to make routes more direct, provide better connections, make them fast, frequent, reliable. We want to improve transfer opportunities and crosstown access. And then finally, as we just talked about, we want to improve that weekend service availability to the extent possible. Third, we want to realign service to demand. We need to rethink lower performing routes and services, consider alternative service delivery strategies where we think it might make sense. And what I'm talking about there is potential on-demand or new service delivery models that might provide a more cost-effective cost per trip. Certainly something that we want to put on the table and consider. And then our hope would be that we could reallocate those resources that we saved by being more efficient and invest them elsewhere throughout the system. Finally, we want to prepare for future development. So as part of this plan, we're going to develop a long-term strategy and vision for certain areas that we know we're expecting extensive development, such as the Polo Club Boulevard and Hamburg I-75 area, as well as Georgetown Road. So those are things that we're keeping in mind as we're developing our service recommendations. And we want to get out ahead of that development so Lextran is well positioned to serve that demand into the future. All right, finally, yeah, go ahead.
Georgetown Road is a new affordable housing complex. Is that may be a Fred question, but is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that, and then on the other side of the street, there is the farm. Is it Dairy Farm, Dairy Road development master planning that's going on? That was part of the road swap. So those two things are on either side of Georgetown Road. That's the development that we're looking at here.
Dan, this is Lindsay Thurston. I have a quick question before you move on to the next slide. The cell phone data, whose is it and how do we get it?
Good question. The cell phone data was provided by Kinetics. We obtained it through a company called AirSage. It's completely anonymous. It's fully scrubbed. It's aggregated to the census block group level. And it shows us travel patterns and volumes between census block groups. So that's it's really powerful data. We obtained a sample for, I believe, April 2019 and April 2020. So we can see what the travel patterns were before the pandemic and during the pandemic, kind of at the height of the pandemic. So we can see, kind of how travel patterns shifted. So basically what it is, it's data that a company, any cell phone company collects from your device and tracks how you move throughout the community. And then it aggregates that to census block groups, so there's no privacy concerns or issues there.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great. All right. Next steps. What we can expect as we work towards wrapping up the project. Over the next month, we're going to finalize our analysis of the onboard survey data and refresh our needs assessment. Then we're going to finalize our route recommendations in the month of July. August, we do hope to get out to the public, in the August, early September timeframe, share our draft recommendations and get feedback from the public and stakeholders. Then after that, into the early fall timeframe, we're going to develop our implementation and phasing plan and our financial plan and work towards wrapping up the project into the October timeframe. All right, so that's what we've been up to, and that's where we're headed. Not going to go over this, but this is just a summary of what we just talked about, what we learned. I'll leave this up if there's any further questions. I think I blew through the time and went over that Fred gave me, so I apologize for that, but thanks for all the great questions and conversation. If there's any others, I'd be happy to answer those now. All right. Hearing none, Fred, I will turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Dan.
Adrian, I didn't really have a question. I just wanted to say thank you for doing the work on this and providing us with your presentation today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thanks, Dan.
All right, thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions, Jill, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Madam Chair, we are to the change order report. Are we okay to move on?
Yes, please. We'll go with our change order report.
All right, thank you. This month, just as a matter of information and business, I wanted to report 3 change orders to you. One is with our contractor for HVAC and plumbing, DeBraw. We have a contract for service with them, and we will be entering into that 5th year of service. They did give us some advance notice that they need to increase their cost per hour. It is an $11.74 per hour increase, simply due to the rising costs of business and commodities, labor. Our estimated increase through next May is about $5,800 total. Our next change order to report is with Gillig, our vehicle bus manufacturer. This change order for $7,438 is for the purchase of 2 conduit entry frames, which are basically the electric bus charger installation kits. Those kits were not included in the original resolution cost or in the previous change order, which was resolution 2020-05. Again, that is a cost of about $7,400. And our final 2 change orders, I should have said 4 change orders, but with 3 contractors. The final 2 are related to the rider amenities at many places program with bus stop amenities, shelters, and boarding pads. We had 2 areas where there was some additional concrete, additional regrading of sidewalk areas to remove mobility hazards and ensure ADA access to those stops. And you see the cost changes listed there. One was around $1,500. The other was just over $1,900. So both are just informational items at those rates, but did want to report that to you today. Thank you.
I apologize for that delay. I was having some audio trouble here. Thank you for those change reports. Next on our agenda is old business. Do we have any old business to discuss?
I do not have any old business to report.
New business, anyone? All right, hearing none. Next, just some proposed agenda items for our coming meetings. If you looked at the agenda there, it appears that, as previously mentioned today, we have board elections, officer elections coming next month. Looks like there are some resolutions on the horizon for July and August. As usual, I think, Jill, would you like for anyone to present proposed agenda items to you?
Yes. That will be appropriate. If you have any proposed agenda items for next month's meeting or a later date, you can always send those to me, and I will review those with the chair and get those on the agenda.
Okay. And then I do not believe we have need for a closed session today.
That is correct.
All right, great. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. If no one has anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
George motion.
Harding second.
All right. I can't imagine there's too much discussion about that. Any opposition? By consensus, shall we adjourn for today?
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll